You know, when you think of the Roman Empire, you think of this incredible machine, right? An empire built on amazing engineering, unbreakable laws, and unstoppable legions. But what happens when that perfectly designed machine runs into something it just can't move? In one tiny, fiercely unique corner of the empire, Rome's grand architecture of rule didn't just bend, it shattered.
So that's the big question we're diving into. How could an empire that had a handle on so many different peoples, from the forests of Britain to the deserts of Egypt, fail so spectacularly in Judea? This isn't just a simple story about a rebellion. Nope, this is a fascinating case study in what happens when imperial power and cultural identity collide head-on.
Okay, to really get a grip on this, let's just quickly walk through the timeline. We're talking about a story that unfolds over almost 200 years. It kicks off in 63 BCE when Rome first shows up and plants its flag. Then things escalate until the absolute catastrophe of 70 CE when the Second Temple is leveled, and it all culminates in a final tragic revolt that ends in 135 CE. It's really a long, slow-motion disaster.
So, what was Rome's game plan here? How did they try to manage this notoriously difficult province? Well, they didn't just have one idea. You can think of their strategy as this architecture of control. They actually had two different blueprints they tried to use to solve the problem of ruling a people with a powerful sense of who they were and a single invisible God.
Rome's first idea was actually pretty clever, pretty elegant. The plan, don't rule directly. Instead, they set up what's called a client kingdom. Basically, you find a loyal local leader who gets it, someone who can keep the peace, make sure the taxes get paid, and handle all the tricky internal politics while always knowing who's really in charge: Rome. It was a hands-off approach that was supposed to minimize friction. And you know what? For a while, this system actually worked. And it worked because of one guy, Herod the Great. This man was the absolute master of the balancing act. He was a political genius, building incredible cities and temples, and showing total loyalty to his Roman bosses. But he also knew he had to be absolutely brutal in crushing any opposition, while, and this is key, being just careful enough to respect local religious customs to keep things from boiling over. It was a tough, ruthless, but effective formula. But here's the problem. Guys like Herod don't exactly grow on trees. He was one of a kind. After he died, his kingdom was split up, and Rome decided, okay, new plan. They switched from that indirect system to direct rule. They started sending their own governors, these guys called procurators, to run the show. I mean, on paper, it makes a certain kind of sense, right? You get direct control over money and laws, but what it really did was remove that critical buffer between Roman authority and the Jewish population. And that decision, it was a disaster waiting to happen. And this is where the whole structure starts to get these tiny, fatal cracks. That switch to direct Roman rule just created a whole new set of tensions that the old system had been designed to avoid. Suddenly, friction wasn't just possible, it was pretty much inevitable. This quote from a Roman historian, Cassius Dio, just hits the nail on the head. The new governors Rome sent over, a lot of them were ex-military guys or pencil pushers from totally different parts of the empire. They had no clue about the local culture, and frankly, a lot of them were just there to get rich. Their heavy-handed approach wasn't just seen as oppressive, it felt like a deep, profound insult. So, let's break down what people were actually so angry about. These weren't vague complaints. We're talking about specific things. First, heavy, soul-crushing taxation that just bled the province dry. Then you had acts of shocking religious insensitivity, like Roman soldiers doing obscene things in the temple courtyard. And finally, the Romans started confiscating land, which for these people struck right at the heart of their families and their heritage. Every single one of these was like a spark landing in a pile of dry tinder. And then you get the one thing that was a complete and total deal-breaker. The Emperor Caligula, who was famously unhinged, declared himself a living god, and he ordered that a giant statue of himself be built and placed inside the most sacred spot in all of Judaism, the Holy of Holies in the Jerusalem temple. Look, this wasn't just an insult. It was a command to violate the absolute core of their entire faith, that there's only one invisible God. It was an impossible, unthinkable demand. The only thing that stopped an immediate, full-scale war was Caligula getting assassinated just in time. But the damage was done. The trust was gone. The relationship, totally broken. It was only a matter of time. A few decades later, in 66 CE, all that simmering anger finally exploded. The Great Jewish Revolt began, and the entire architecture of Roman control came crashing down. The war that followed was just brutal and systematic. It actually started with the rebels winning a shocking victory which stunned the Roman authorities. But Rome's response was terrifyingly predictable: overwhelming force. They sent one of their best generals, Vespasian, who methodically crushed the rebellion in the north, pushing everyone back towards Jerusalem. And then began the horrific siege of the city, which ended, of course, with the total destruction of Jerusalem and its magnificent temple.
The human cost is just staggering. It's almost impossible to wrap your head around. The historian Josephus, who was actually there, an eyewitness, estimated that over 1 million people died in the siege of Jerusalem alone, from the fighting, from starvation, from disease. Now, modern historians debate that number, but it gives you a sense of the sheer scale of the horror. This was easily one of the deadliest, most destructive events of the entire ancient world.
But the story doesn't just stop with the destruction of the temple. The failure of this revolt wasn't just a military defeat, it led to the complete remaking of the land and its people. The consequences of this war, well, they still echo today. This table just lays it all out, clear as day. Before the revolts, Judaism had a physical, geographic heart, the temple in Jerusalem. After, that center was gone. The very name of the province, Judea, was literally wiped off the Roman maps, and it was renamed Syria Palestina, partly to erase its Jewish identity. And this moment really marks the beginning of a widespread global scattering of the Jewish people, known as the diaspora. The world was fundamentally and permanently changed. You'd think that would be the end of it, but about 60 years later, there was one last desperate rebellion. It was led by a charismatic messianic figure named Simon Bar Kokhba. But this revolt was crushed with even more brutality by the Romans, and it extinguished the very last embers of hope for an independent Jewish state for almost 2,000 years.
So we come back to this question: what happens when an empire's power meets a people's faith? Rome's architecture of rule was built on pragmatism, military might, and a demand for assimilation. But in Judea, it ran up against a different kind of architecture, an architecture of belief, of identity, of faith that simply refused to be torn down and redesigned. It's a timeless, powerful lesson on the limits of empire and the enduring strength of conviction.